Hello guys, since I've done these new things with all the walls and stuff, I plan to do this tutorial to help how to set this up and shows a lot of how the behavior of this. I'm gonna split this into multiple parts because there is a lot of things to go, there's a lot of different behaviors and things that could be worth talking about. But let's just start off with how to create a door that can be used either for pushing people or as a teleporter as well. There's a slight different behavior in how you can set them up. But yeah, you have this brush here. I'm gonna use as a door. You can put whatever height you want, something, and just make it a door by func door. So like that, now we have a door. And before I continue, and I should mention I'm using GTK as radiant instead of net radiant. This will work fine in net radiant, things may look a little bit different, especially in this menu, as I don't think this thing here is present in net radiant, though you can add this manually if you want. Though it's quite easy, because if you want to control the angle of the door, the angle it opens in, here can you see I have top down view right now, so if I click 180 I know it goes in that direction, 90 up, so that makes it very easy to see. But you can just write whatever angle you want between, like that, between 0 and 360. 0 and 360 is the same thing. I guess it just loops if you go higher. I haven't tested, but I guess so. Yeah. Angle. The next thing that's very important is the lip key. You have to go see here. Lip controls how much of the door remains when the door is active. So if you have a lip of 0, if this door, let's say, to easy, make it a bit smaller. We have a door of this size. If this door is triggered to open, it will close itself exactly at the point where this is. So this start line of the door will be where the end line will be after it opened. That makes it very easy to see how the door is going to look when it's opened. You could do the reverse and click start when open and place them in the opposite direction. This have the exact same thing, except it's going to affect how lightning affects the door. Not sure which is most optimal. So yeah, if you add a positive lip, so if I press right 64, which is 64 units, it would keep 64 units behind. So instead of having that line be the endpoint, it will use 64 units back, which is there. So it will look like this instead. And if I put negative 64, which is mostly what we're probably going to use for door teleport something, is the negative value, they would push extra further. So instead it would leave this much space between the doors. So opened, it will place itself there instead. And you can use that to control doors to push door much further than the size if you want. But mostly you're gonna use a lip of 0 when you're working with the doors, so it makes it easiest to control. Then trigger only is probably what you want to use, because that means you can't press the use button on the doors. It can be if you're testing levels with doors, it can be useful to not have trigger only set during the testing phase, since if things start to glitch out. This mostly affects if you're working with door teleporters, which I'm not really going to cover too much in this video, but yeah, it can be nice to set not use this for testing, since you can reset doors if they glitch out. But for final maps you probably only want to use trigger only, unless you want the player to be able to click on the door to activate it, which of course could be the thing you can work with. So next we have close when idle, which you can find somewhere in this list. It's easy there, or you can write it yourself for the matter. You don't need capitulation like it's written there. You just want to write close when idle instead. Same thing, even though it gives two different in that menu. This is a key you may not always use. I'm going to cover how you do it when you're not using it. But close on idle basically just means when the door have opened fully, it will automatically close again. So the wait key is how you control it. Defaults wait 2. This is the default one. So you don't change wait key. It will go up, be active for 2 seconds, then go back down. If you want it to go back immediately, you put wait -1, which is mostly also what you want to use. The problem with using wait and close when idle is that there is actually a minimum delay from when the door is first triggered until close when idle can start moving. That's a time delay. So if the door moves slow, if you have a speed, which I'm going to cover soon, of 100, the door will slowly move to max open, then immediately start closing again. If I have a bunch of speed like that, it will instantly go there, but it's now too soon for closed idle to be able to trigger, so it will be active for a little bit before it goes back. It's not a full second, but maybe half a second or something. And that depends on the speed of the door, which next thing to go, or speed, the main control the behavior of the door. You can have low speed, this is default. It's the same speed number, I think, units per second that the player uses. Yeah, that's mainly control the speed. Speed of 1000 is kinda medium, slow speed. Can be useful for slowly pushing the player. Speed of 10,000, generally fast but not instant, and 10,000 or 100,000 pluses tend to be instant. The thing about this speed and how it affects behavior tends to be on the length on the door. So this fires in this direction, so with this length number. And it's going to be a very big gap when the door moves so fast that either if it moves enough to go from one position to the next within a single server tick, I think, not frame, because it should be based on the servers, but basically one frame of the servers ratio. The behavior will change from a pushing door to door teleporter. We'll cover a bit more about that later. But for door, so I'm going to mostly focus on this way. I'm going to focus on door that pushes players. So anything from, well, 1 to around 10,000 is the number you're going to work with for pushing door. If the door is too small, this door with a speed of 10,000 will be a door teleporter, because it's just too short for them. Whereas the longer door, if you make the door really long, now 10,000 isn't nearly enough to be the door teleporter. But length like this should still not behave as a door teleporter when it's this long. You could easily test around a bit, and you probably want to test what speed is best for the use you have. That's just a rough estimate, but yeah, that's how you set up the door. To trigger the door, you just create a trigger and trigger multiple, and then just set the target. So door 1, for example. Then you go to the door and give that the target name, so it fires that. Normally I like to set a wait key on the trigger, so delays so the trigger can't be instantly activated immediately again. So just a small wait can be quite useful. I think it has as a default 0 to 2. I like to extend it a little bit to avoid the door glitching out, because they get fired multiple times in a row. So, but may not be necessary. It depends a bit on how the door is used. If you have the trigger the gate before and the door later, you may want to have bigger weight, because then someone else can come in and hit in between. So, but that's just the basic of how to use the door. So let's instead go into an example map. So we have this example of one platform there. I want the door to push the player as you jump out and just there. So let's look at the door. We have this length door, so if I move this door, it would, in open state, it would be like that, because I have a lip of 0. That means so once the door is full open, it will look like that instead. The other one, just a target name, which matches with that. Trigger only to not have the player be able to activate it. Wait -1 and close and idle to have it close as soon as possible. And a speed of 10,000 for this. This, with this length of door, would make the door move very fast, but not instant, and it will function as a pusher and not as a door teleporter. If I instead were to add another 0 with this length, this would turn into a door teleporter. And this thing has absolutely nothing weird about it. So it's just a normal, I have a high weight key just for testing purpose, but yeah. So let's go in game and put this up. Let's see if I got the keys correct. So hopefully it should show the game feed. So if I just jump into this, you see it pushes me. So and that's how fast it moves. If you also watch on the close one idle, you see it stays active for a bit. This is the minimum delay of when the door can close for using close one idle. We're gonna cover how to use target, delay, and relay to make it faster. That's the basic behavior of the door. So if we go out, instead just for showcasing, putting them 2 zeros, not 1 would be enough. I like to put the speed to 1 million if I make draw teleporters, because that makes sure it's always a draw teleporter. Just give a brief show of the difference between a door teleporter and a normal pusher door. So now this moves so fast that the door will move everything in instantly. First showcase, if I jump into the door like that, you won't notice any different at all. But if I go out a bit and jump in, you see, I'm not next to the door anymore. If this was the door before, I would always end up in this location at the end of the door. Depending if I jump like this, I would still keep the momentum, of course. So door teleporter, it keeps my relative position between where the door is and where I hit the trigger. So the trigger is here, boom, I'm out of bounds instead. And if I were to hit somewhere around here, I think, no, a bit more, too much. See, I just get stuck. That's because the position I would end up is inside the wall. And if the game detects that the other location from where door teleporter tend to send you is inside a object in any way, or a brush in any way, a solid object that's not another player, I think, the door teleporter will just stop functioning and you will get stuck inside this door instead. This is most of what I'm going to cover for door teleporter just now. Just give a very brief explanation, but yeah, simple explanation of how door teleporter works. Let's go to another map here. So let's talk about wall jumping on a door that's moving. So here with a long door, can't make it over by one wall jump. The door is, oh, wrong key. Not too much different except the speed of 180. Everything else, lip 0, trigger only weight, it's the same, just the speed of 800, I mean, not 180. This is the same again. So this, nothing special about this. I should click the plus to go into that map. So explaining wall jumping on a door, or rather multiple wall jumps on the same door. So if I jump into this, can't do a second wall jump as you noticed. It's actually possible to do a second wall jump if you time it correct, like this. But to make more wall jumps, it's much easier the higher speed you have. So if I go back and take a bunch of speed, I hopefully will be able to get a second wall jump, but sometimes don't, because it's not super consistent though. Rather, it's a certain timing thing to it. The more speed you have as a player, the easier it is. And I tested this to be relatively easy, but I guess I'm not doing too well just. There I got the second wall jump. So as you can see, it's not super consistent. There's both the player speeds there. The more player speed you have, the easier it is to get the second wall jump. You kind of want to face the wall as well as it's moving, it makes it more consistent. So if I look more at the wall then compared to if I look more forward, you see even the first wall jump didn't come out there. Tried to play space and delayed. I tried to jump at the same time I did everyone else, they still delayed it. So look more at the wall. It's a bit janky as you can see with this, but additionally, second thing that can control how easy it is the speed of the slower this is. So if I put 5 on, it would probably be much easier to get that wall jump off. If I put too low though, at speed of 100, it's not fast enough to catch up to the player after wall jump, so you can't really go with that. And I don't really have a list of what speeds are good. We could go in and take a look at, let's see, I think Quakicy's one is, yeah, here we have one flaw, And here we have a door that's supposed to be volume multiple times, so I have a speed set to 400 in this door. So that gives a bit of a what could be useful. It's a bit easier to do volume on this wall than it was in that example. I even have, I have no clue where it is, but I have another example with him. Should I prepare this beforehand? This is that one. That's not correct. Sorry about this. Oh, wrong. 7 is wrong, I know that. No. Maybe it's not in this list, of course. Old it is, and here we have those. Then we go to this room. Here we have some example of doors I'm supposed to volume on the back of, which has a speed of 600, which here its example is you stand up the wall and just jump on the same door as it moves. Which you can see is a bit varying of the speeds, but you will have to test. If you want to have multiple volumes on the same wall, you will have to test the speed and see what is optimal. I don't have perfect speed to use for you right now, but this is quite new, so there's going to be a lot of explanation or testing, I mean, done for things. Oh, sorry, that was entirely wrong map. Door example 3, not that. So next example map here. So here we have first a bit of example of how you place the trigger will change the behavior of how you feel the door working. Additionally, the door speed of 5000, otherwise nothing special about this again. Lip 0, so basic, these triggers are the same. I need to compile this. 3 So the different behavior from this, in this here, I just jump into it, it triggers immediately, whereas on the other side it wouldn't. But if you see, if I jump in and back jump at this, it still gets that back jump. It feels really natural that the door come out like this, even though I actually hit the trigger, so the door starts moving before I back jump. And if I do it on this side instead, where the trigger is later on, it actually feels less natural, for me at least. But this changes the behavior. You can use this to control the behavior of the door. Additionally, things to take notice on why this works like this is because the door doesn't actually influence the player's speed in any way. It's like if I hit and jump into that, it's the same thing if I hit and jump into that, except the wall is moving. So it just pushes the player forward, but it doesn't influence the actual speed physics. If I jump along the door and wall jump on it, it's the same if I do this. Door doesn't influence the player really in any way, or the physics of the player's speed that we see, or how the control of the movement. It just pushes the player at the same time, which is the main idea behind how all these door teleports and pushing works and how it can be used for maps. So continuing, we have next example having angled walls, and additionally a further example of how different trigger location can change the behavior and feeling of the doors. Same thing here, the doors, they move just up, so 180, lip 0. This lip 0 for an angled door checks the max location, like uses that point versus that one. You could, for example, if I have second door and have both these marked and click find door on them, they will use this location versus that location on both doors, since these are treated as the same object. So that's good to know if you're trying to save entity space by having multiple doors be marked as the same, as they use the maximum, all the max distance from the total square area that's around it. Yes, another thing about this story, you may wonder how does the behavior of an angled door affect you when you hit the trigger. Actually, the angle doesn't affect you at all, as you may see there. I still get hit as if there's just a flat door, not an angled door that hits you. So that's partly on how this jumps with angle wall works. If you have a trigger, you can see how the delay affect me versus if I have a trigger that's covering all this. Oh. Especially for this kind of wall, this feel, having it like this makes much more natural feeling to the door. So it may, in some cases, walls like this be better to delay your volume by hanging along the wall. That's mostly about how you fall down. So yeah, that explains how angle wall works. And did I? Oh, all right. Here to further explain another thing about how, as talked about close when idle, how we use that to control time. A much better way to control time if you need to fine-tune that. For all those examples, for personally I use close when idle, but for here I don't have close when idle. Still have weight -1, and for this example it's actually more important to keep weight of -1, since it otherwise affects the timing on the door and makes it a bit more awkward. But instead I have this trigger that goes into these two entities instead of directly into the door. And here we have two, in this case, two target delays. You can use another example, which is a target relay. What this does is it takes a fire target name, which is from the trigger, and then fire to a new target, which is now this door. What this does in between the target delay do is that you add a wait key. So this means this is hit. It will go to this target delay, wait 0.5 seconds, then fire after the door. And on the second one, it does the same, except 2.5. You may notice here I use target delay, or I use delay as key, here I use wait. You can use either or, but it will, don't use both. I think it would always check the lowest, or it will always prioritize delay or wait. I'm not sure. But doing this normally, pick one or the other. Additionally, target relay is the same, except there is no wait or delay key. So if I instead had this is the same as if I would have used target relay. It instantly fires, no delay. But for this example, I want to show a delay. But you use this to fine-tune control or speed. One final thing for this to talk about, which is that you want a minimum. If I had, let's say, not had this, I had a target relay, this first target in a relay which instantly fires, then I want the door to close as soon as possible. Then the shortest amount of wait time I can use is 0.1. That's still much faster than the delay time of a close when idle key used. But if I use shorter than 0.05, which is half that time, the door may sometimes work, but sometimes it glitches out and doesn't work at all. So use 0.1 as the shortest amount of delay between when a door is fired until it's fired again. And yeah, so that's this. And let's show how this can look in game. So the example of this, I hit the trigger actually there, it waits a bit, then it fires, and then I get enough time to do another wall jump of this. So you can do things like this by using fine-tuning controls. Makes a perfectly smooth corridor even though it's this distance. Yeah, this is how you fine-tune speed control using close when idle. -1 is usually fine if you don't have a need for controlling. If you want door teleporters, when you really want to get the teleport feeling, so using an invisible door, you probably want to use the minimum delay of 0.1 from after it fires until it closes, because otherwise you can hit it again if you're working at higher speed, especially since with teleporters, which is something I should have covered, should cover still, I think, is in this case, if I jump into a door, I still get stopped, my momentum gets stopped. I hit this trigger like that. But if this was a teleporter, it would actually instead keep my forward momentum, just teleport me back, but I would still have forward momentum moving forward. If that door didn't go back immediately, I would just hit that door again and get stopped anyway. But yeah, so now one final bit to talk about. This bit of an experimental thing which I haven't used for maps, but there is a different key. Instead of using angle, you can use a key called angles. This takes two numbers. 180, as you see here, is the same as that 180. The first key, though, is incline for height difference. So this door would be set to fire up. I think it should be set to fire up, I should say. You can do to check this and make these keys, you can use a quick command. This is present in NetRadar as well, which is cam to angles. So if I want to get this to fire as angles, normally this is used on target push. So if target push to fine control where you want the player to send if you want upward. So I want to send a bit up and straight forward. I aim something like that, click counter angles, and it automatically gives me. I can then fine tune this. The final 0, as you saw, if I click again, that's for some reason sometimes added, sometimes not. It doesn't seem to do anything. I've never seen it be anything other than 0. It can be deleted safely as well. You can control the angle. You can add this on yourself, or you can use counter angles. You maybe want to use counter angles to get a rough idea what you want and then fine tune them by hand. But as you see, this should fire in this angle. So then this with a negative should fire downwards. 150 should be a bit like this. Here I have a 0, so it should not fire up or down. 130, so something like that. The final have a very step downwards angle and straight forward, so something like that. That's how they should fire, but there is a slight glitch when using angles on doors, so let's go in game against showcase what instead happens. So as I said, they should fire with an upward angle. Instead it fires downwards for some reason. They should fire down, and yeah, it fires up. So for some reason the negative and positive of up and down is reversed from using counter angle. Can't explain why. It may be fixed in NetRadar, don't know. Probably is. But in GTQ it's reversed. But you can just change the minus. But the other angles of 180 and those, they work perfectly fine as you would expect it. But yeah, this can get angles on this. I have not really explained or tested how this affects the player physics when they push you and whatnot. As you may have noticed when I did this first door, I want to close this. There's nothing away. You see this, I follow along on top of it, but if you... This one, I actually got stuck, but that may be because I'm under it. So let's try. Again, jump away, see if it pushes me. Oh, too soon. Not enough time to get out. I'm not sure if this actually push you as you would have expected or not, but yeah, it's something to test. So that's mostly it. One more thing about how long this goes. As you may have noticed, especially this one that's going up. this is only this high, but it went up this high. It seems to follow the length, but since it's also go diagonally, it should look at the length or the width of it too. So I'm not exactly sure how it calculates how long it should go, but it doesn't look at the height. That thing is for sure. So it looks at, it uses this number to calculate how far it should go. So it's probably some kind of diagonal length, width versus length of the thing that calculates how far it should move. Yeah, it's much harder to control how far it goes, and I haven't used this for maps, but definitely an option that could be used if you're experimenting. But yeah, that's going to be it for this first part of this. Other things to of course explain is, later things to go on, is having a door like downwards that pushes the player up, or for that matter down. And of course door teleporters. There's much more to go in depth on how to use and control door teleporters, some of the things you need to watch out for when using them to avoid issues and whatnot. Of course you can still try experiment door teleporters, like giving the basics of how to set them up, but I'm gonna do more to cover that later on. But yeah, I hope this will help, and I hope someone will make some interesting things with doors and whatnot. Yep.